Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about the film My Sister is a Hussy, which was produced in South Korea in 1961. This film is also known as My Sister is a Tomboy. It talks about two sisters. The eldest sister, she had a black belt in judo, and the younger sister, she was more traditional. And their father, he taught judo to the eldest sister so she could defend herself. The point is that she was not an ordinary next door girl. She was very empowered. She wasn't submissive to men. And whenever there was something happening that didn't please her, she threw people on the floor. And in the beginning of the film, she was going out with her sister, and then two guys appeared. They were sorts of scoundrels, and then she beat both men. And then when she took the pictures she took with her sister to be developed, she complained about the pictures. She said that the pictures was horrible. She was a kind of troublemaker. She had a very strong personality. And then the guy was very pissed off, the guy who worked in the photography store. And then there was a kind of quarrel and both sisters left. And then we could see that when they arrived at home, that the eldest sister, she trained judo with her father. She also helped him. He was a chiropractor. And her father, he was very worried because the youngest sister, she already had a boyfriend. She wanted to get married, but she couldn't because the eldest sister was supposed to get married first. However, the eldest sister refused to marry. Then the boyfriend of the youngest sister, he had a friend. He talked about his situation, that he wanted to get married, but his girlfriend couldn't because her eldest sister didn't want to marry. And then his friend said, "Oh, introduce me to the sister of your girlfriend and let's see how we get along." So when they were both introduced, we find out that the guy, the friend of the boyfriend of the younger sister, he was exactly the employee of the photography shop with whom the eldest sister had quarreled in the beginning of the film. But then we can see that after a while, both sisters got married. They even got married on the same day. The eldest sister married the friend of her brother-in-law. And while the youngest sister, she had a very happy marriage and she was a traditional wife, submissive to her husband and wearing the traditional Korean clothes and everything, we can see that the eldest sister didn't change her personality. She was still strong-willed. She didn't want to do the housework, and she didn't want to tell her husband where she was going, and she wore Western clothes. And then her husband wasn't happy with this situation. They quarreled, and then she threw him on the floor, hurt him, and then she returned to her father's house. And then she complained of her husband, saying that he slapped and kicked her. And indeed, in the middle of the argument, her husband slapped her. But she didn't tell her father that she threw her husband on the floor. Then her younger sister got to know about it, that her sister was having a troubled marriage because she was too much strong-willed. Everything, whenever there was an argument, she threw people on the floor and she couldn't talk. And then the younger sister, she knew about what was going on and called her father while her eldest sister was still there. And then her father was very upset, thinking that the husband was beating up his daughter. But then the youngest sister told that it was only her side of the story, and actually it was she who was beating up her husband. Then the father invited the daughter, the eldest daughter, to spar with him, and then he beat her up because he wanted to teach her how it was like to be thrown on the floor and beaten up all the time. And then after that, the eldest sister, she regretted her ways and learned how to be a more sweet and caring and traditional wife. Of course that this film is very chauvinistic for nowadays standards. But we must understand that this film was produced many years ago, and those chauvinistic concepts, they were still usual in many societies all over the world. So we shouldn't judge the film with nowadays eyes. If we do that, it can disturb our experience because, of course, the film is chauvinistic. The woman, the eldest sister who had a black belt in judo, she wasn't a bad person. She was just ahead of her time. And yes, she was a kind of troublemaker, but she was a decent woman. And maybe she didn't trust men so much because maybe she didn't have any reference of happy marriages around her. Maybe she was afraid of losing her freedom and that the marriage would mean that she would have a terrible time. And I see this character of the eldest sister as a very empowered woman, and a woman who would have a wonderful time all by herself, who didn't need a man in her life, who was very happy and fulfilled with the activities she had, while the youngest sister, she was more traditional, the typical next door girl, and of course more within the standards of her own era. But then, of course, considering the chauvinistic tone of this film, we can see that in the end of the film she had to somehow learn how to be a traditional, a usual wife. I mean, how to be a housewife. The father even told her that she would serve her husband, to be his friend, his mother, his sister, and blah blah blah. Those were the concepts of the time. So of course that she would be tamed at some point. So the end of the film is rather predictable because she couldn't behave this way for her entire life, because it was really discrepant with the society around her. And of course we need to, again I repeat, we need to understand the historical context of the film, that it's a film produced many years ago, and nowadays the world, the societies and marriages, they work in a much different way. And if she lived nowadays, for example, her life would be way different. But it's an entertaining film when we see that within its context. The acting is good. There are some very famous 1960s actors in South Korea. And it's a nice film. It's interesting and it's a comedy, so it's funny sometimes because she wasn't weak in any moment. She was always strong, not only physically but also emotionally. That's all for now, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you!